Welcome to another episode of the Every Arkansan podcast. This week, we've got Kristin Walker with UrbanPromise sharing about what they're doing to change the lives of youth here in Arkansas. Well, good morning, Miss Kristin. We're so excited to have you here to just share your heart for the children of Little Rock and Arkansas and even Delaware. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in North Little Rock, and I went to North Little Rock High School, and then I studied at Arkansas State University. I have a twin sister named Lauren, and we have an older brother named Brent, and my parents still live here. And then during college, I ended up studying for a year in Massachusetts, which is where I first heard about UrbanPromise.
How in the world did going from hearing about it to actually kind of plugging in really happen?
Well, I was going through a crisis in my faith. I grew up in the church, always believed in God, but I really struggled to believe that I was truly saved. And so during my junior year of college, I started praying that God would send me somewhere. I'd read a lot about missionaries, and I learned that most people really experience God when they get out of their comfort zone. So I'm just praying, like, God, just send me somewhere. Can't you just send me somewhere? And I was like, what was that inner city ministry I heard about the previous year? And I couldn't even remember where they were, what their name was. And I was like, well, oh well. But they emailed me the next day and said, hey, we found your information. Would you be interested in coming to serve for the summer? And long story short, I ended up in Wilmington, Delaware, of all places. I always thought I'd be called to Africa or some, distant land. But God sent me to Wilmington, Delaware. And that summer, I met these incredible people who were living out their faith, living in a staff house that looked like it was going to fall apart, not getting paid anything, pouring out their lives in this neighborhood. And it changed my life forever. And I never again struggled with my salvation, because to me, God showed me He did have a plan for my life. He revealed gifts that I had that summer that I never realized, and He showed me that He could use somebody like me with all of my doubts and fears, and that His word was true. I think that's one thing I really discovered that summer. Similarly to the missionaries I'd read about, I had to depend upon Him. So every morning, opening His word and standing on His word and realizing that His promises were true, it was just incredible. So very thankful that I had that opportunity.
And that summer turned into how long?
I ended up staying on for 8 years. Never dreamed I would commit for about 6 months at a time, because I thought about going to seminary or getting a master's degree. And so I'd commit, and they'd be like, all right, we'll take you for 6 more months. And then it became pretty apparent that this is where God had called me to stay until He led me elsewhere. And so I was directing an after-school program for 1st through 5th graders on the north side of Wilmington, Delaware. And I watched lives change, and I saw a community of Christ, the body of believers, being able to transform lives through the power of Jesus Christ by really effective after-school programming, and most importantly, hiring high school students. So these neighborhoods that we were serving, the high school students there were known for selling drugs or dropping out of high school or being involved in illegal activities. But the model of UrbanPromise is to hire these students and train them and to believe that God could use them. And it is incredible. It was incredible to see the students there, the gifts that they had. I always say we don't give the students their gifts. God did. But at UrbanPromise, we allow them to use their gifts, to further their gifts, and to have a vision that they actually can be powerful role models in their neighborhood. And they can be a part of the change that they would have liked to see as a kid. And so we've seen those students go on to graduate from college. Some of them are still involved at UrbanPromise. They've gotten married, they're raising families, they're teaching at UrbanPromise schools. And so I really, as much as I was transformed by Urban Promise, that community of Christ pouring into me, allowing my gifts and talents to grow, I also saw it meeting the need in some really rough neighborhoods that that God has called each of us to be a part of, breaking the chains of injustice, seeking hope for the oppressed, pouring out ourselves on behalf of the hungry. And I saw it right there before my very eyes. Isaiah 58 being lived out and light shining like the dawn. And so I continued to stay. And then 7 years in, I started praying, God, if you want me to leave, I'm willing. I finally felt good at my job. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. You're like, all right, I'm finally rocking this. I feel like I'm doing a decent job as a director of an after-school program. And I didn't necessarily want to leave, but I felt like it was time to say, here I am, Lord, send me. And people had made jokes before that I would go back to Arkansas and start an Urban Promise. And I had always told God, if you want me to do that, you need to make it abundantly clear. That is not necessarily a dream that I had. But I started praying, and a month later, I felt the wave of the Holy Spirit, which doesn't typically happen to me. Grew up Southern Baptist, so, But
I got the same background, so.
But I heard the word go, and I knew I didn't have to ask where. I didn't have to ask what. I'd been coming back home for holidays, and I knew that there were areas of Central Arkansas that needed something like Urban Promise, and that this model is very replicable, and that we could start something like that here. But I was absolutely scared out of my gourd. I went straight to my favorite park that I like to pray in, and I just bawled my eyes out. I don't want to leave, It wasn't pretty. But God made me a promise that day, because I'm like, I can't imagine doing ministry without, my leader, or this Lori, this lady that works there, and Rob, and the different workers that I grew up with. We'd all been there for years. And God made me a promise that day, or encouraged me, I am not calling you to do this by yourself. I will send people to help you. And I spent the next year identifying where we were going to start, raising money, reaching out, and man, it has just been incredible ever since. And I would say Arkansas Dream Center is one of those answers to that prayer.
Thank you.
And I know I'm not maybe supposed to plug you guys, but I just want to say, having meals provided, I never dreamed that would be something that, would be possible. And I definitely see God meeting those kids. Got to eat, especially coming from school. You got to feed them before they'll be willing to learn or do different things. So that's definitely one of those things. But just seeing God provide incredible volunteers, and then meeting these high school students that we've hired, and the kids, I can definitely testify that when God calls you somewhere, He provides, and He makes a way where you have seen no way.
I think one of the things that I as a leader get to see and have the honor of seeing is longevity of relationships.
Yes.
So many volunteers come in, I'm going to come in once, or I'm going to come in a couple of times. And what you talked about were growing up, becoming employees, meeting a spouse, going to college. It was a lifetime.
Right.
And I think hitting on that concept of relationship.
Yes.
So many of the young men, especially, and the young women that we work with, have never been given an opportunity for a job.
Right.
Let alone a safe job.
Yes.
With family.
Right.
And then so much of the time we hear stories, my college fraternity this, my college fraternity this. That coming back. And that's one of those things I love. We've got a young lady that grew up with us through our programs, and she's at college now. And it's so exciting because she comes back and she'll pop into church. It's not her church, it's our church that I go to. Mr. Drew, how you doing? Here's a hug, da-da-da-da-da. Or she'll just show up at the office. Mr. Drew, how you doing? I've been doing this in school. This is going. It's so crazy that my willingness to come back day after day after day, I get to see the fruit. And
Yes.
so many other people that invested in this young lady's lives, they don't get to see it
Right.
because they came that once or whatever, but they did make a difference.
Absolutely.
Whether it's for a day or an hour or 6 months or whatever, it makes a difference that's so hard to see except in the long term.
Right.
But how was it? This is the next point that I really would struggle with. You left relationships of 8 years to come here. Tell me a little bit about what that means to you.
Oh my gosh, that was definitely the hardest part. I mean, I'd watched kids grow up at that point, and also the people that I worked with on the staff. So that was really tough. I mean, saying goodbye. But I think God showed me, that He wasn't leaving those kids or those families or those relationships, and that it was time, and I visit Wilmington a lot, and I still bump into my old kids, and that's been a joy as well, getting to stay in touch with them. And of course, you don't see them as much as you would want, but the really beautiful thing about Urban Promise is, like I was saying, those committed staff who have been there. They're there to continue those relationships, and so someone took my job and has continued those relationships, and they've actually brought students for spring break to Arkansas, and I've gotten to show them around, and so the story goes on. And but it was, it was like ripping my heart out.
So you make that decision. You know God's in this. You take that crazy step of leaving the comfortable for the uncomfortable.
Yes.
The good news is you did have family back here.
Yes.
But I guess we got introduced by the name that comes up the most often, which is Jeff.
Right.
Jeff
Okay.
Spry.
Yes.
Hey, they're starting this
The
new thing.
connector of all connectors.
Exactly. you need to talk to Kristin Walker, and you and our Kristin got connected and started. But how did it start here? What were kind of some of the steps? Because I think there's a lot of people that, I want to start a ministry, and then it just kind of flounders.
Right. Well, I would say my former boss, Rob Prestowitz, who leads in Wilmington, he was just on my side the whole way. And so he he said, okay, well, why don't you take a year? And he gave me these step-by-step kind of things of going forward. And so that was incredibly helpful. And I can't imagine starting this ministry without having someone like him who'd done it before. But I came back. I would come several times throughout the year, and one of the visits that I did, I reached out to the chief of police, Mike Davis, in North Little Rock, and I said, take me to the neighborhood that you feel like needs the most help, that you guys get the most calls about. And he took me to the Barron Cross neighborhood off Pike Avenue. And I was a little surprised that would be the area he would identify, but he said, yeah, this is the place that needs the most help. And he identified several churches in the area. He said, if you could get in here, that would be a great location. And one of those was the Acts Church. And so I met with the pastors there, and miraculously, they have allowed us to use their facility, which is in walking distance from Boone Park Elementary, where most of our kids go, and they just walk on down. And that has just been incredible to see. They realize the need in the neighborhood, and that they would open their doors to this ministry that is not even brand new at this point, it hasn't even started, and allow us to run our summer camp. I think one of my favorite memories is when people ask, well, how did you hire your first high school students? And our first summer 3 years ago, we hired 6 students from the neighborhood, and I just walked around with my dad, actually. And we would just walk up to high school students, and some of the first ones was over there by Silver City Courts. There was a group of teenagers just playing basketball, and I walked up and said, anybody want a job? And there was one young man, Noah, and he said, yes, ma'am, and shook my hand, and he was one of our first students that we hired. And man, just looking back, we take a retreat with them. And they told me afterwards, so there's 6 high school kids, and they didn't know me at all. Their parents didn't know me. And talk about faith, to get in a van with this crazy lady. And they told me afterward that their parents were praying night and day, and, that we took them out to Lake Greer's Ferry, and on this weekend retreat, and they had no idea what was going to happen. But it's just been an incredible thing of seeing all these little steps come into play. But you learn what you don't know. Oh my gosh, if I had any clue of what it takes to start a nonprofit, I think God protected me. I remember at certain times just pulling over on the side of the road just in tears, because you're so overwhelmed. And I have a huge benefit. UrbanPromise International, they allow us to use their nonprofit status for really as long as we need, and they do our accounting and things like that. And man, I can't imagine for people just starting off from scratch. It's been really nice to have that family and that network of different executive directors that I can reach out to. But it's quite an adventure, as you know.
And I think most of the people that I meet with that come to me and say, I want to start a nonprofit, I'm going to do this. I'm like, oh, you got the right heart. Great. I usually never hear from them again, because they go out there and they try to do it on their own. And I tell my staff all the time that it's at least weekly that I'm ready to just turn in my resignation. There's something that goes on that I'm done. I just need to hang it up. I'm not the leader I thought I was, or whatever it is. I'm ready to quit. And if it weren't for those relationships that I can pick up the phone and call Jamie down the street here and say, Jamie, having one of those days. And he goes, okay, hang in there. Or a Jeff Spry, or whoever it is.
Yes.
That relationship is so important, because
absolutely.
I think people get so involved in ministry for the sake of ministry and forget the relationship side of it, and keeping themselves healthy and keeping themselves encouraged that, okay, I am on the right path, that we burn out, flame out, and crash land really quickly.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Yes.
So in this, I think it's really important on that note to talk about what kind of keeps you going. So you guys are doing after school, you're doing summer programs. What is it about that just makes you wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait to go at it again? Some people talk about, I got a case of the Mondays. No, I'm excited for Monday to come, because we're starting back over. We're going for it. What is that for you?
I think the first story that comes to mind, or first person, is a young man named Bradalen, and he is one of our street leaders. And now he's been promoted to team leader, so that means he helps me supervise the other high school students. And just thinking about when I first met him 2.5 years ago, and how much he's grown. And he does JAG at North Little Rock, so he gets to come to us earlier. And so his help with one of my interns, assistant site directors, Lindsay, it's the 3 of us running camp until the other high school students arrive. And to see, when he first did that a year ago, he just wasn't really into it, and I was constantly having to get on to him. Now he shows up, he picks up the basketball, and he's playing with these boys, or the football. And I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, I'm not the most athletic person in the world. And for these boys to have this high school student, a male, throwing the football with them, it means so much to them. And so on the flip side, Bradalen is a hero. Whereas if he was sitting here, which you should interview him one day, he would tell you that his vision for his role in the neighborhood has completely changed. He would not be ashamed to tell you that he and his friends were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing, and that working at UrbanPromise showed him there's another way. And that now the reason we call them street leaders is that they are to be leaders in our programs, but also on the street, realizing kids see them. And so one of his favorite things now is that kids are walking up to him, their face is beaming, and he's he's been leading life skills lessons. So he teaches manners and having a positive attitude. And we have these guiding principles that we've been teaching. Taking ownership, doing things with your whole heart would be 2 examples. And he leads that, and he explains it, and he has a gift for teaching. And I'm trying to encourage him to consider that as a field, because we know they really need good teachers that care, and especially males would be great. But he feels like he would have karma returning to him because he wasn't the most pleasant student. But anyway, I think thinking about him and the role model that he's providing for these students, the example that they have in him, to that's one thing that just really motivates me is knowing there are, now Bredalen is 1 in a million, but there are hundreds of students. I meet them all the time. We've got 6 working with us right now. These incredibly gifted young people who have so much to offer, but we can be the ones to reach out and give them that opportunity to use their gifts in a way that gives them self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth, and also provides the next generation with something to aspire to become.
My pastor has this phrase, you can belong before you believe. And I mean, I think it's so admirable for what you guys are doing. It's like, I'm going to invest in this child before they believe in their worth, before they see their worth, before they get who Jesus is and how he can transform their lives.
Right.
And so that's just amazing to see how y'all do that, because it's different than what we do or what anyone else I know does. And I think that's one of the great things about these kinds of conversations is getting to see that it takes all these different types of models and systems, and there's not the perfect little method to reach everyone.
Absolutely.
So that's one of your older kids.
Yes.
And they're leading your younger kids.
Yes, sir.
So at what kind of age do y'all start the children?
So we have 1st through 5th grade camp called Camp Freedom, and that's operable in the school year and in the summer. And then we have a middle school summer camp. We'd love to sustain it during the year, and that's one thing we're working on, because we know middle school is such a susceptible age that we have got to be reaching them year round. But currently, Bredalen works with 1st through 5th graders. And we've just seen some incredible miracles happen in that too. We've been, like I mentioned, we've been incredibly blessed to have fantastic volunteers, a lot of retired educators who've done reading recovery, and they've come in and they've tested all of our students. And so we know where they're at in literacy. And we've been able to pair them to work one-on-one. And we still have some really critical cases that I firmly believe if we truly love these students, we're going to help them learn how to read. And kind of like you were talking about before we started, we've had a church, the church that I grew up, Park Hill Baptist, they have practically adopted this program. And we have 30 volunteers, some from Acts Church, most from Park Hill Baptist, and some other churches that are coming. And we're seeing things change. I could honestly say 3 students have learned to read because of their involvement with UrbanPromise. Not because of me, but because of these incredible volunteers who have this, one I think she's part angel. I mean, she just has this like sweet spirit about her that has melted the icy demeanor of a student who has no belief that he can read, who may have been told he's not going to be able to read, or may have been ridiculed, and that he was able to read. And you know, a lot of times these students move really quickly, and so unfortunately he's no longer a part of our program. However, I know that with the gift to be able to read, he is now in a much better place. But at the same time, that volunteer showed him the love of Jesus Christ. And she constantly used little rhymes, poems about Bible stories. She was having him write things. And so she was able to, first of all, she was living out her faith in God, faith in his love for this young man, or this little boy, but also encouraging him through words about the love of God And she combined that with something that helped him, that is going to help him fulfill his God-given dream. Because honestly, if a kid can't read, that's really going to hinder the plans that God has for them. And so I'm very passionate about trying to get the kids back on grade level so that when they get to be a teenager or a college student, they can continue those dreams that God has put inside of them. And so I believe as the body of Christ, we have this incredible ability to step alongside. And I know you have a dream of helping people get involved. And I would just say, you know, there is something everyone can do. And certainly if people are, well, I've never worked with kids, but we've had volunteers who've created folders and ways that someone who's never worked with kids before, they just grab a folder, work through this math problem, work through reading, and it's really helped equip our volunteers. And so,
well, and I think it's important to go back to a case of Jabraylin. He's a high school student that's probably not had the same kind of life experiences as a normal teacher would have had, but just the ability to throw a football or to bounce a basketball makes a difference in someone's life.
Absolutely.
No matter what the skill set, no matter what you think your ability is, you have something to offer.
Right.
And God wants you to use what you have, and He's going to make up the difference.
Exactly.
Lord knows my ministry should have failed about 1,000,000 times if He wouldn't have shown up, because I don't have what it takes.
Amen, brother.
So, but Kristin, I am so thankful for what you're doing with Urban Promise and your just faithfulness to say, okay, God, here I am, use me. What's the best way someone can get in touch with you guys if they want to start volunteering or they want to figure out another way to get involved?
Absolutely. They can email me. My email is Kristin, Kristin, @urbanpromise.org. Or check out our website, which is urbanpromisearkansas.org. And we're pretty active on Facebook, so if they want to check out our Facebook page. Okay. We would certainly love and encourage all people to reach out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for just sharing your heart. I know it touched me, and hopefully it's going to touch a lot of people. So.
Thanks, Drew. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed getting to hear from Kristin Walker. She so loves this community, and she believes in the youth of this community so much that she hires them to reach out to the younger kids. That is chasing her God-given dream and helping others chase theirs.